Thanks all for coming. I think you can expect this to be a very meaty session in terms of some insights in regards to QA and QA automation. So first, what I wanted to do was just thank Deputy for looking after us tonight. So round of applause for Deputy, please. They stayed up all night making these pizzas. Thank you. So, okay, so first speaker, Raj. So Raj Mahawal, yep. So Raj is QA, well, you can tell them that basically he's from SafetyCulture, doing in the QA automation team. Yeah, so would you like to tell folks what you're doing just quickly?
Oh, yeah. Yep. So hi everyone, I'm Raj. I'm working with SafetyCulture currently with around 16 years of experience in quality engineering. So currently, yeah, I probably have worked in all part of quality assurance. So be it like from manual to automation, mobile, web, and backend. And yeah, so I worked in pretty much in Sydney and UK and multiple locations as well.
Great, very good, thank you. Okay, Andy, do you want to wander on up as well too? James, sorry, James. All right, so next we have James, who coincidentally is operating at Deputy as well too. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm James. I'm a senior Android engineer at Deputy. I've been here for almost 4 years now. And yeah, look, at the moment I'm on the mobile platform core team, which is a very small team that we're basically one iOS, one Android, and one QA engineer. And yeah, look, we had that means that I've had probably more experience since I've been in this team in QA than in the rest of my career, which has been cool because it's been great to have a real QA engineer poke holes in some of the ideas that we have and some of the things that we do.
Yeah, you get exposed to everything by having those people.
Yeah,
just like a real startup.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll leave the best till last, obviously. So Daniel, I'm hoping everybody will be able to hear you as well. So do you
I hope as well. Can you hear me?
Thumbs up from online. We're thumbs up here, right? Yep.
Yep, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel. I work at Buildkite as a solution architect. So I joined Buildkite in September last year. I'm based in Melbourne, and part of my role at Buildkite as a solution architect is speaking with existing customers and prospects to find out what their needs are in building, testing, and deploying software, and help them get the most out of Buildkite, the product. And for those who don't know what Buildkite is a hybrid SaaS CI/CD solution. So our approach is kind of we'll host the control plane and the SaaS part of the CI/CD solution for you, but we give you the flexibility of hosting and running your own agents on your own infrastructure.
Great, thank you very much. And Sue. So Sue Park works with me at Contextual, and we have a kind of oh, that's nice.
Hi, my name is Sue Park. You can call me Sue. I don't much like the meaning of the English name Sue, S-U-E, because the Korean meaning is Sue. It means brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a QA engineer and then QA lead for the Contextual. I have a 4+ years experience for the test automation. Yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, right. Yes. Okay.
So let's get started. All right. So what I'm going to do is just kind of like run around the panel. I would invite anybody to just kind of yell out a question if you've got something pertinent, and we can also basically do, you know, QA at the end as well too. So we're going to do QA at the end. We're doing QA all the way through. We're doing Q&A at the end as well too. And I guess if you feel free to unmute yourself, as long as it's not the kids screaming online, to ask a question as well too. So please do that. All right. So just to sort of set the context, and maybe I'll skip Daniel for this now, but what is manual and what is automated in your processes? So Raj, what is?
So, so when I talk about the manual, so for us, how we do is that we do both systematic and then ad hoc exploratory testing as part of manual. When I say systematic, it's about, so we got to engage in the quality cycle very early. So we follow the principle of shift left, do as soon as possible. So it's not only about the designing phase. The first thing that we ask question about is when we want to develop any feature, the QA ask the question about why we want this feature, like what is the use of this feature? Will it solve the customer purpose, or how many customer purpose it's going to solve? So since beginning, we follow like manual process includes like a pair testing with the developer. So when we initially develop, we do like a lot of pair testing, and then after that we have a feature. So for each feature there will be a feature coordinator, and then for that feature coordinator we have a systematically defined feature checklist, which include a lot of quality tasks. And through the development of the product, all the phases, that checklist, we make sure that we are following, doing all the quality guidelines.
Can I ask one basic question? Who does the QA team report to? Engineering manager, product?
So usually we report to the QA manager only. So
Who does the QA manager report to?
they report to the director. So
The director of?
yeah. So director has like having multiple, so they have like engineering managers as well as the QA managers, so like that. So they have multiple under that.
Yeah,
So
but is
yeah.
is the director a director of QA or a director of
No, it's not director of QA, it's director of engineering. So it's director of engineering who is holding like multiple teams, engineering managers as well as like QA managers.
Got it.
So that is also one thing. It's like a good question you asked, that we try to keep the QA team separate, because what happened that when actually one more thing is that we say not QA, it's QE, quality engineering. And all my career I worked mostly as a QA, but in SafetyCulture when I started it was QE, and then I know the real difference between QA and QE. So mostly we follow the practice of quality engineering. And yeah, to answer the question, it's always hard that if you report to an engineering manager or a developer manager, then so it's always, I feel that it's good that you have your own separate community. So that is what we follow up.
Cool. All right, so I'll hold you there, and maybe what we'll do is get a bit of a perspective from James. So yeah, what's automated, what's manual, and maybe a percentage as well too, just to make it tangible.
Oh no, there's people here that might fact check the percentage. Look, we're probably, I think we're definitely in a transition period still around what's manual and what's fully automated. I would say, and this will be from my lens as a mobile engineer rather than from the QA engineer lens. But I think we're slowly getting to a point now where we're automating a lot more of like our actual release pipeline. So previously, most of what was automated was at development time. You'd raise your pull request and you'd be stopped there to go back and fix something because a test had failed, or you would be stopped at definitely a much earlier position. And then we would have, and still do have, basically a Google Sheets checklist that our QA engineer has put together for us. And that was kind of, our smoke test. So before every release, it's like, here's your checklist, go through that. And we're slowly getting to a point now where we're being able to automate parts of that checklist. So, which is great because it frees up so much time for the rest of the mobile engineers to continue on with other work. And it's just a lot quicker as well, if we can identify those problems really quickly to hot fix them. So
Cool, great. So Sue, and just to sort of like sort of frame this up a little bit, Contextual produces an SDK And so we're not trying to, just help our users. We actually have to make sure we fit in with lots of different applications that do lots of things differently. So automation's become a large part of that. Tell us a little bit about what was manual, well, actually, let's just say today, what's automated now?
In QA, both manual testing and automated testing are crucial to ensure the quality of the software product. The product cannot be released if either of these approaches is missing. For the automated testing, it involves using tools and test scripts. And if the task can be automated and doesn't require the human judgment or intuition, then it should be run as the automated test. And then this can handle the repetitive task and large data sets and the complex scenarios, which can be time consuming and expensive for us to do. However, for the test cases that requires the human judgment and evaluation, such like evaluating the user experience, not testing the business impact of the text, and identifying the potential risk, then it should be performed by manual tests.
So is that actually something that's visual on a screen? Is that where we're at today?
Yes, for the SDK perspective, like the UI testing, so it needs human eyes to test it. But I would say that we need to make an effort to build the automated testing in a maximum range that human can perceive. That ensures that the release process is much faster and in an efficient way.
Got it. And James mentioned about holding things together with a Google spreadsheet. Don't we use something like Appium or something like that? Or?
Oh yeah, just we use the Appium, and then for the manual testing, we just follow the steps by the BDD testing framework. So it's just use the simple English language. So yeah.
Is anybody familiar with BDD? Is anybody not? Is it worth actually just spending some? Can you just say a little bit about BDD? Just
yes. The BDD is about the framework that allows anyone to write the automated test in plain text using given method, for example. Given represents the condition of what the software will look like when represents the key action that user will take. Then represents the verification steps of what the user should expect.
all right, cool. So if you want to know a little bit, I mean, I think it's mostly for non-visual stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's where you can actually basically examine the result of an operation, whether it's a return code or something like that. Yeah. All right, cool. So we'll dig back into that a little bit, but Daniel, what are you seeing in your user base? Are you seeing any automated tools being used? So Daniel's a vendor, so it's really probably more about his customers. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, not so much about the tools that that customers or users are using to, beyond Buildkite. Like I'm talking about command line tools or SDKs. We don't see so much of that. But in terms of what's automated and what's manual in QA, it's interesting. Something that's interesting that comes up is the acronym CI/CD, and whether that means continuous integration, continuous deployment, or whether that means continuous integration and continuous delivery. And the difference being, are you simply deploying an artifact, or are you automating your whole process so that you deploy into production as part of the entire CI/CD process? And they're the two different interpretations of the CD part of CI/CD. And in most cases, it's not one or the other. So it's kind of a combination of both. And when you said, what is manual and what is automated, we have some customers that are able to fully automate the process of building, testing, and deploying into production without any manual intervention. And there are rules and tests in place to make sure that, you know, test coverage is over a certain percentage, or there are no critical bugs. And based on this criteria, you can deploy directly into production. But if that criteria is not met, you can block and ask for approval in order to deploy into production. So there's like automated, then there's semi-automated that requires manual intervention, and then there's kind of cancelling or blocking a build entirely and going back to the start and fixing those issues before you can deploy again. So I just thought that was interesting to point out, since the question was around what's manual and what's automated. Sometimes it's a mixture of all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a really great segue into my next question, which is, you know, what breaks QA what breaks QA automation? And you're saying there, well, it doesn't have to be broken, it just becomes an exception condition in which a human is inserted into the process. So that's pretty cool about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the stuff that we do see from our side. So with Buildkite, one of the differentiators is we don't actually see the source code that users are using. So their agents will directly talk to their source code management system to do all that stuff. So it's kind of the security aspect of our system. And that's why I said we don't often see the command line tools that users are actually using, but we do see more of the process and the steps in their pipeline and how they handle different scenarios. So yeah, in terms of leading into that next question, what breaks automation? Yeah, there are things that can break it entirely. That always happens, but there can be kind of what we call soft failures, and there are different ways that our customers deal with soft failures. In that you can just notify someone and ask for approval, or block, or retry certain steps to do things again in different ways if something fails. So again, there's like all this effort you can put into automating and working around different scenarios to make sure that the whole thing is automated. But I think inevitably, every now and again, there's going to be some sort of manual intervention that has to happen at some point in time.
Excellent answer. Thank you. So Raj, of the automated things, what sort of war stories have you got around breakages of automated things?
Yeah, so I think there are so many things which can break the automation. But if I just say the top, so first thing, so when we think about automation, the first thing is about choosing the right tool. Now, when you want to choose the right tool, I can give an example that I have worked in BDD for multiple companies, and I really liked it. The way it has a plain English language, so even if a new person joined the company, it's easy to understand. And I was a good fan of BDD. But when I joined the SafetyCulture, the context was different, because here we are having like quality engineering, and developer is pretty much involved in the quality engineering process. So he's also writing the test and pretty much involved in the automation. Now, if I just put my data, I thought that this is the best tool, and I just put that tool here, that will not work. Although it is a good tool, but it will not work in the given context. So each context, each environment has its own requirement. So when we decide a tool, we should do that analysis. That is the first thing. If we just choose wrong tool, it will not work. The second thing which can break the automation is scaling. Scaling is very important. That initially, any framework can sustain in a 10 test cases automation. But what about when there are 500 test cases? So that is the thought process we should have initially when we start designing and defining the framework, that how my framework will be able to sustain in a large scale when after 4 or 5 years when there are 400-500 test cases and the maintainability and everything. So that is the second important thing which usually fail the automation in longer term. You start it, it works well, and after 1 year when there are so many test cases, that's very hard to maintain. The another thing which I found is that, so if you talk about the development, so in the development process, if you see a developer is developing a code, but he's taking help of a lot of people. Now there are quality people who are verifying. There are designers, there are product team. There are so many teams who are helping to make the success that more of the product. But when you talk about the automation framework, I saw that like a lot of company has an automation team. So there's a manual team, there's automation team, and that.
So you have that, do you? You have an automation team?
So we don't have automation. So what I mean to say, like when we have only a specific automation team, it means that only few people are responsible for maintaining, managing the framework. So I think that is not the right approach. The approach should be that you should collaborate with everyone. So that
Baked into the culture
Yeah,
right
yeah,
across everybody.
across everybody. So the developers should be equally part of that one, and then only you will able to maintain, manage, and make it a success. I think these three things are I think the sort of mostly I see that where the automation or any framework start.
What, so when you said before, BDD is great, but BDDs may not be right in a particular
Yes.
context. What would you swap out for there? Like, is it literally like a visual type situation? Like, you can't use Selenium here or whatever,
So why BDD was not successful is because, as I mentioned, because we need to have a framework which is so overall testing frameworks are along with the development repo, and developer are completely participating equally or more as compared to writing the scripts. Now, if you have a BDD kind of thing where you have a plain English language writing file, it's hard for developer to write, that thing and maintain that kind of thing in that culture. So in our requirement, for us, it didn't require that, maintaining that extra layer of file. Yeah. So I think it's all depend. Although I understand it's good, but for this specific doing context, we don't want that.
Cool, thanks. So James, you said you were on the journey. So like, what particular tools or methods are you using for automation at the moment? Because you said you're actually reaping the benefits of it time-wise. What are some of the things you're doing there that are really working for you?
This is a hard question to answer. What's
I can ask an easier
just
one.
because I'm happy to explain, but for a bit of context, I think that as probably a lot of people have worked at companies where you see a really nice new framework, testing framework, and that looks awesome. We should use that because our current solution is all full and no one wants to use it. It breaks, automation keeps breaking. So you jump in, try and do that, and then the person who was leading that leaves in a year, and then you have another half implemented. That's happened to every company I've ever worked at, and that's fine. That's just what happens. But so with what I was saying before about actually being more focused with a small team and someone to really guide us on QA and QA automation. Part of what we were trying to get into last year was being really challenging ourselves to explain why we wanted to pick up a new framework before we did. And so that meant, writing RFCs and things like that. So the two, probably the biggest one that I'm sure everyone's heard of would be Maestro. We were very slow on the uptake, I think. Even though we saw the splashy videos, saw a million developers saying how good it was, and we were treading very lightly. So, but I think that something like that, going back to what breaks automation, that framework has a lot of capability to lower the strictness thresholds. And
so maybe not everybody has heard of Maestro. Like, I hadn't heard of it until I came and met you guys. So I didn't know what Maestro was. Is there anybody else? Am I the only one? No, we've got a few. So it's worth actually saying a little bit about Maestro.
Sure. So what Maestro is, I hope I do it justice here. Look, it's a testing framework that covers both iOS and Android mobile platforms, and it basically tries to allow you to write tests in not a natural language way, but when you're reading the test back, if you come to someone else's test that has been written, reading that back makes sense. You're like, okay, if we want to do this, that's what we need to do next. That sort of thing. That's the writing test cases side of it. And then the other side of it is yeah, just how you can configure how strict it is going to be with timeouts and things like that. There's basically a lot of levers that you can pull and allow it to be quite flexible in not failing your test just because a network call took 12 seconds instead of 9 seconds, and your threshold is 10.
So that's an example of breakages, right?
Yep.
But just normal boring things like timeouts and
Yeah.
your test system or your staging system is way under resourced in comparison to what your production environment is, etc. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think, yeah, I'm cautiously excited about that. And we've started writing, like ramping up the tests that we're writing using it. But again, it's just sort of, we really wanted to be sure and not just throw in another test framework and have 5 instead of 3 that are half implemented.
So the way you described it, it sounded like BDD to me. Do you know the difference between the two, or Sue, do you know the difference between the two?
That one.
Do you have any experience with BDD?
Not experienced that I would be comfortable making a fool of myself talking about. So
there's this gap between the two chairs, but
Exactly.
let's fill it somehow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's okay. So it's natural language. It's got these. I know for a fact about the BDD timeout management and stuff like that. So, is there anything else fantastic about Maestro that BDD doesn't?
Look, something that I haven't really used a lot yet, but I know that a lot of people are excited about is that you can not just write tests with your keyboard, but you can kind of click on UI elements.
Right.
So you can connect it to your real phone.
Right.
And go through a flow.
Yep.
And then just tap on things. And it's like, okay, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to scroll here? Do you want to tap here? Do you want to wait for some text to appear?
Got it.
So that's the studio side of it that is super exciting.
Mm.
And yeah, I get the excitement because if you haven't been thinking about the exact test that you want to write and you're just getting into it,
Yeah.
you can just look at the screen and tap things. And
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
So we know that in the web world from a Selenium perspective, but Sue, in mobile, there's some sort of way of doing that with BDD. I thought there was some tool that you can drive the interface as well too.
Yeah, but we just use the screen recording and the taking screenshot of the Appium.
Right.
And, yeah.
Okay, so that's part of that Appium, whereas it sounds like that's all kind of like built into Maestro as part of its one environment, if you like. Yeah, that's cool. From a mobile perspective, what does that do for you in terms of fragmentation, like different devices and things like that?
I think that to answer this question properly, you'd probably have to come back to me in a year. But I can try. And I think what we're hoping for is that being able to relax certain things and just say, there's going to be a button here. It's going to be somewhere in this quadrant of the screen. I don't want to have to know the exact pixel where that button's going to be.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, especially on Android, where, I mean, I've got a flip phone. So my phone's the classic phone that all the popular apps that we use on my phone, they look awful because they're just, it's only starting to become a more common thing now. But I think that, yeah, we're hoping that Maestro being able to loosen up that strictness will solve a lot of those problems for us. And a lot of those breakages that happen just because we did a dependency update or a new version of Android came out, and that's what our test device uses now, and bang, half of our tests are broken.
Yep.
It's that we're hoping this solves a big problem for. And our little checklist, our Google Sheets checklist, we're hoping it can automate that away, basically.
Yeah. So is that Google Sheets checklist, is that like 1,000 rows?
Oh, look, I don't know if our QA engineer Barbia is on the call. She could probably tell you, but it's a lot, and it's just extremely well thought out. You know, if I made a list of what I think needs to be tested, the list that Barbia created is 3 times longer.
Yeah.
And will actually prevent breakages. Yeah. But those are the things that, like, you know, come release day, if everyone else on the team is too busy to help smoke test the new release, you might have one engineer sitting there going through this checklist.
Right.
Just
Right.
it's a lot of time that they could be building other things.
Yeah.
And these things can be automated, and we have automated some of them in the past. And we're transitioning from a lot of older Espresso tests, if you know what that is in Android, to Maestro, and hoping that we can just free up a lot of time.
Cool. So, are you familiar with Maestro at all? No. Okay. So, all right. So Raj, what about iOS versus Android? Folks who are kind of web people. Sorry, we are a mobile group. So, what are the different challenges you see with iOS versus Android versus hybrid? So, what's SafetyCulture? Is it written in native on all platforms?
It's native.
It's native. Okay, cool. And Debian? Native. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. So.
So I think in terms of automation challenges, and we talk about iOS and Android, so both has its own challenges and in terms of their own things, but on a broader way, one thing which I feel that Android is having is about like a big coverage we need to do as part of test, because there's a lot of devices. The size of devices are different, so which makes maybe a little bit like more coverage. But yeah, in terms of challenges framework, I would say it should be same. So for us, we are using native framework. So like we were using Appium, and we're still using Appium, and we are investing a lot in new things. So we are investing currently in the native framework for both iOS and Android, as a functional UI test, which sits together with the kind of report. And there are few benefits. First thing is about the concurrency. The second thing is, which we are also investing and trying to do, is about test impact analysis. So what it means is that so whenever we merge the code in the master and the whole CI/CD pipeline runs all the test runs, so we run the whole smoke test. So that part of the smoke test is always static. So there is a static amount of test, like a fixed amount of test, like which will always run, whatever you deploy. But which is not always true. So what we want is that when we merge the code, there should be automatically impact analysis should be done about which part of the code is changed or impacted, and we run only that part of smoke test in spite of running the fixed second smoke test. So yeah, that is one thing. But I think to answer your question, in terms of challenges, I think both same, but just about the product.
Different pain points. Yeah. So certificates, like in iOS, certificates would be one of those things, right?
Yes, of course. So that is one thing, and then I think the version thing is also in Android, because into support a lot of orange version.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got fragmentation of devices, and then you've got basically a very long history of versions, whereas the fragmentation in iOS operating systems seems to be fairly well. Everybody gets rounded up very quickly in that world, don't they?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So they don't exactly, Apple don't exactly end of life certain things for a few years, but somehow they've made our operating system upgrades much. Somehow they aggressively get people up and running. Yeah, I think we also find too that like in Indonesia, for example, or possibly other areas in Asia, you'll get a situation where people are still running on, a gingerbread or something like that. You literally got people that are using those devices, and some apps actually want to service that community as well too. Whereas if SafetyCulture is probably targeting, they may be all sorts of people in building industry, but they're all, kind of in Western countries. Is that?
So yeah, it's European and then US. So mostly Western.
Yeah. So that's interesting in itself. Like, I used to live in the Bay Area, and people would launch apps they'll launch a video app for iPhone only and the latest iPhone only in order to be able to actually prove to the VCs to get the next round of funding. Rather than, this is working with that. So it demonstrates really well in the VC's offices and they can put videos together of people doing that sort of stuff, but actually broader America might not have been able to actually run the application. So that's like that on a global scale. Just back to what Daniel mentioned about the interpretation of the CD and CI/CD. Is it safe to really say that CD just doesn't even exist in mobile at all? In the deployment sense, right? I'm sorry, I'm looking at a screen which is not looking at you, but if I look up there.
Is that a question for me or Raj?
Well, I'm asking Raj, but I just want to clarify, you gave those two elements. So CD would literally be actually in the user's hands, right?
Yeah, as in the control of deployment into production would be in a user's hands. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm throwing out there is that CD of that type doesn't even exist in mobile at all, right?
So for us also, what we follow is bi-weekly release. For mobile, so web is like definitely continuous deployment.
Yep.
Okay, for mobile, definitely you need to take approvals and then put in the Appstore and things. You have like a bi-weekly release or a release manager.
Oh, that's interesting. So you maintain a discipline literally or bi-weekly? It's disciplined. That's really kind of like a non-negotiable thing that you'll be updating.
So mostly we follow the bi-weekly. Sometimes it can slip
a
little bit, but mostly we have for each release there is a release manager located, and then whatever changes, the feature change or any bugs or anything is going to be there. It should be in the master.
Okay. So this is really cool. So what happens is it's going to get out there within 2 weeks. You've got a situation in terms of your process, and presumably what you have is you have various parts of automated and manual testing and so on. But what does the whole process look like beyond that kind of like in-house type thing? Do you then go using something like testflight to a broader set of users? Like, do you have a beta group, or do you have an internal set of users who you try and force to actually do tests before it actually gets pushed to the App Store? What's kind of sitting between a QA pass and a broader UAT thing, etc.?
So what happened is that first thing is as soon as whenever you are merging to the master as a feature plan, all the tests will be run, all automated tests, CI/CD pipeline, all the UI API, and then before release also all the automation tests will be run. We also do exploratory testing before release, all together, sit together. So both automated and exploratory testing is done. The another thing is we never release like 100% customers. So we release in like a cohort with 10, 50, and 100. So initially we release to 10% customer and then get the feedback out of it for like few days or a week. And then we gradually increase the percentage. Each feature is, of course, behind the feature flag.
So using a feature flagging product. So which one are you using for that?
For feature flagging, so for feature flagging, we are using a tool.
So launch darkly or
Launch darkly.
Yeah.
So we are using
glad to help.
So many tools.
Yeah.
So we are using the launch darkly and
yeah, great.
So just to on the side.
Yep. Similar sort of thing at Deputy. Any feature flagging on mobile?
Yes. So we probably don't use it that extensively compared to Deputy on the web, but we do use it, and we use Launch Darkly. But I guess similar to SafetyCulture, we look, if there was a large new feature that was going to be a candidate for feature flagging, or even some that weren't a candidate for feature flagging, we always sit and have quite a large group having like a test party, basically. So when we think that thing's ready to go, it's all ready to go out the door, we have a test party, and then our QA engineers find many things wrong with it.
So I'm sensing it's not a bi-weekly release cadence here, because otherwise you'd be you'd be eating too much pizza, right? So
Well, exactly. So we're actually pretty much weekly release. Really. However, we pick and choose what gets released. So the weekly release can often go out without a large test party, and we rely heavily on the automation that we've got and everything else. And then that smoke testing that a small amount of people do at the time of release. We lean heavily on that for our every week release.
Yep.
But when there's high risk releases, you know, something fundamental has changed, or this is a very large feature, or just the code diff is huge. Those sort of things, they're the candidates for feature flag or test party.
got it. Okay. So Daniel, sorry, I feel like I've got my back to you, but I've actually only got my side to you if I look at the camera. So are you seeing similar sort of behaviors in your client base that have mobile? Is it really that kind of scenario where there is human gate points going through to that? Are you seeing anything particularly smart? You know, I'm guessing you've got some pretty large operations given Buildkite's success, both in Australia and globally. So you've got some probably very large organizations using you. What are the sort of best practices you're seeing around that kind of like release cycle?
Yeah, I think what I was saying before is kind of the consistent thing, is that nothing is, I mean, in the best case scenario, things are completely automated. But as soon as you have new tools and things like that, there's always going to be an edge case where something needs manual approval or manual work, and you need to have a way to handle that, like some feature or way of blocking a build or preventing a build or retrying steps, things like soft failures, all those, like use of that and all those kind of features to handle those different scenarios is the consistent thing that happens regardless if you got 5,000 engineers or 5 engineers. And it's funny that like some customers that have 5 engineers have really strong mature practices in how they handle all that, but maybe they're working on a small product that they know intimately. And then customers with 5,000 engineers might be on the opposite end of the spectrum where things are just mostly done manual. So it's absolutely a mixed bag. But on that question, like I was listening to Raj talk before, and one thing you were talking about was like scaling and how you scale tests. And you can write tests, but as soon as you have to scale them, what you implemented initially might not be able to cater to the scale that you're going to eventually reach. And a big thing that we see there is like parallelizing tests or sharding tests and test cases to occur across different agents. And only maybe you can speak to this better than I can, but some tools don't cater to doing that very well, whereas other tools might be built specifically for sharding tests. So if you get in a position where you put all your eggs in one basket on particular test frameworks and they don't handle sharding, and then you scale to where you need to have sharding or parallel testing to make sure that builds and tests happen quickly, you can get yourself in a predicament there. So I suppose, like, yeah, a good question from me to the people here is like, is parallelizing tests something that's considered?
So Sue, regression, how much is, what does a regression take for us time-wise? Yeah, just roughly, just to give an indication.
For the mobile, especially the mobile SDK regression testing, we usually keep 3 hours.
Yep.
Because of the Appium has a limitation like this for execution time. So,
Yep.
Yeah. So if the feature relates to like launching the app and then terminating the app, like then it really takes a time.
Yeah, there's all these timeout things you're plugging into the scripts to actually do that.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything in Appium in regards to sort of parallelizing things?
The concept of using Appium is the limitation of the using, like, Appium relies on emulator. it can support the real devices, but it needs to use a USB connection.
Yep.
And also it doesn't support the parallel testing. To overcome this, there is always need for using the third-party testing environment that provide the real device systems and then parallel testing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere where Maestro is a clear winner, or?
I think so. So part of the reason that I think I've been cautiously excited about Maestro is that they, from day one, they set out to basically build a tool that can be used in like a massively parallelized environment.
Got it.
And so they've actually contributed a lot to the open source community with regards to running tons of emulators in the cloud at the same time. So I'm hoping that that is one of the great features that we use. Prior to that, I think the only thing that we had used that was somewhat effective was the Firebase test lab stuff, but a lot of that was built before I started at Deputy, and I just maintained it when there was a flaky test that broke.
Yeah.
So
just coming back to sort of Android fragmentation and so on. I tried to get Browserstack to talk or get us a customer to come in and talk about that. I think one of you mentioned that you'd used Browserstack previously. So do you want to speak to a little bit about Browserstack? And also Browserstack's released a product via acquisition of something called Percy as well too. So have you seen Percy at all? Or has anybody in the room seen Percy at all? No? Okay, so maybe if you could just speak to Browserstack.
Yeah, so we are using Browserstack for the devices emulators, and to just answer the question about the parallelization. So yeah, I think that is very important. And when you have a fixed set of test case, you have to follow that approach to do your execution fast. That is what we are doing, and with a new investment, we are doing the native UI functional test. We are looking into the sharding and all this concept to be applied for phenomenon. So,
very good. Anybody in the rooms? No, I already asked that, didn't I? All right, so I'm just conscious of the time. So what I might do is just throw to the room. Do we have any genius questions from this incredibly handsome and talented audience? No pressure. Yes. Got one over here. So, yep. You guys should do a show. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I'll repeat your question as best as possible in case it wasn't heard online, but it's okay. All right, so this is great to hear about automation with different devices and functional things and stuff like that you might be able to drive automated. But the user's experience of a particular feature or flow is something that's actually kind of still an open question in regards to quality. So does and Daniel, please please chime in if you have an answer to that. I'm aware of this because I actually know a startup that was trying to work on this particular thing and they couldn't get funding. And it's like really, like to me, it's like the ability to actually know and understand that there's actually something that's operating. It's in production, for example, it's operating, but it's actually not working great 25% of the time or 5% of the time. In what situations should that be reported back? So that's a real. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Let's. Yeah, so like, you know, you could say something like Hotjar or something like that. It allows you to screen record, but it's like hell to actually be able to actually navigate to those. Got it. Right. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up online if you're actually hearing what's being said in the room? No? Okay, so he's saying that they're biasing their UX testing to a set of devices. So they're kind of like, they know that there'll be people out there that aren't being tested for, but maybe they're kind of okay, whereas you're hitting the right number of iPhones, et cetera, So I don't need to ask you because I think he's just answered it. Do you disagree, or is there anything you want to add to that, just from a safety culture perspective?
Yeah, that's a challenging thing. So one thing I can just add is about for the iOS, we have a snapshot test. So which is just about comparing the screen. So you already have a screens and you just compare, which is at the unit test level. So it's a low level. But that is only for iOS and to some extent. Yeah.
James, are all those people out there on shifts using, you know, are they having bad experiences and you don't know? What's the story?
So, look, I hope not. But the real
Hope
answer
is not a strategy.
Sometimes that happens. It's part of the job. So I think historically we've probably used more on the analytics side of things for observability over some of that stuff. Again, we're hoping that with something like Maestro and snapshot testing as well, which we just started to introduce last year, we're hoping that those can help cover that. And something that I didn't mention earlier when we first started talking about Maestro, but it's built on this concept of flows, and they're all like composable flows, basically. So, you know, you have one file that just handles login, and that's the login flow. But what you can do then is, and for our example, we want to have, okay, one flow is the login flow. Another flow is going to be publishing your shifts for the week, right? But to publish your shifts, you need to fire up your emulator, log in to the app. And so having composable flows means you can just pull in the login flow and then add that to another flow, basically. So yeah, that sort of thing should, in the long run, allow us to then go, okay, we have all these great tests that cover the purely functional side of things, but with all of the threshold configurations that we can give to Maestro and its various flows that we build, we can then build an entirely separate set of flows that focus on some of the UX kind of thing. Like, why is this so slow? It's like, yeah, the test passed, it all works, but this one's slow. And then maybe they don't need to be run as frequently. You know, instead of running for every deployment, they're run once every few weeks, once a month, whatever it might be. I guess depending on your size and scale, and you can look at it.
Yeah, that's great.
And
So
then
it's
you
very
can analyze those
human-centric in
ahead.
that sense. And if you didn't change something in a particular sub-area, maybe you just drop that out of actually an intensive regression or something like that. Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. That's really great.
iOS and Android upgrades and updates. Do you get many sort of failures from that or not? Because obviously it's something you can't test for. Not quite sure if it works.
That's why I wasn't going to do that. Please repeat. Oh, no.
Good question. Yes, we do. Part of that is kind of alleviated. Sometimes we get some of those things caught for free because in an Android engineering team, you usually have at least a couple of people that run Pixel that gets the pre-release versions of Android and exactly. And then, we download the development SDKs and try and do a little bit of testing beforehand. But especially in a company that's in the phase that we are, but still scaling up and trying to just build what we need to build very quickly. I think we have limited time to sit there and download the upcoming preview SDKs and test every single little thing and see if that works. So exactly. So look, I've always had it in my head that we could one day have, when you have a large set of large test suite and you're testing on many different devices, you can run your UI and integration tests on an emulator that is specifically always running the pre-release build. But I think that we're not there yet. But in my mind, I've always thought that's the way to go, right?
Is there any questions from online? If so, just unmute yourself, and Bess, you may just want to put it back, unpin. So we're hitting 7:15, so I want to allow people to get on their way. But is there anybody online that's got any questions?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can't see you yet. Can you wave your arms? Well, firstly, you can turn your camera on if you like. Yasaswi.
Yeah, thank you. And you got the name right. My question is regarding device farms. What has been your experience? Can you talk about pros and cons and any limitations that you found during your use?
Device farms? Did you say device
Yes.
farms?
Yes. Like Firebase Tesla.
I don't have a lot of experience with them. I've seen a lot of cool blog posts about them and things like that. And I think, Test Lab, I know Google's cloud stuff have a lot of those, which I guess we've kind of used them, but not really directly.
Yeah. Sorry, mate, not enough experience in the room. Is there anybody been doing anything? Cost. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, okay. So anything else from online? Last questions from in-house? Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just interested to know your experience about what sort of metrics that you use to monitor users on your mobile platforms, and also what tools you use to look into things like crash logs and on-device type diagnostic tools that might have to help you troubleshoot problems. So.
It's a plant. Tell me what excellent solution. SafetyCulture.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what we're doing on the Android side of things and a little bit on iOS. So we definitely keep an eye on our analytics, probably a little bit less of the engineering team doing that and more the product side. But I know some of the engineers are just always interested in it and enthusiastic enough to just go and have a look. So that side of it. For Android specifically, we're using Firebase or Crashlytics to just sort of, we have things set up like velocity alerts. So, we push out a new release and all of a sudden we get a spike in crashes. My phone pings and then I get sad and run to my computer. And then separately to that, we use Datadog a little bit as well. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm going to repeat that quickly for those on.
Is there a privacy issue there if you're connecting to a user? Oh, you're talking at test time, yeah. Sure. Yep. Yeah, so you're harvesting the DDMS and yeah. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Great. Okay. But I presume you wouldn't do that once it's out in the, you know, when it's crashing on a user's device, you don't have visibility of that. Correct? Cool. That's interesting. I think we'll leave it there for tonight. I think, as you can see, you could actually do basically a half day on this stuff. But again, I think, you know, we've had some terrific advice. Thank you, Daniel, very much for joining us, and really appreciate the insight you had from larger customers and what's going on out there. Please take a look at Buildkite if you're not familiar with it, just to really get a handle about what a successful. I mean, we are really honoured to have successful Aussie startups here. Buildkite is one of those ones that, you know, not everybody knows about, but it's certainly a fantastic success from a startup perspective. And of course, are you guys still unicorns this week, or is that one never knows with the volatility of the financial markets? Anyways, you know, so anyway, I appreciate everybody coming, and once again, I thank Deputy for their generosity